After I arrived at my most recent trip down to California, I decided I would go up and glass for deer. So I asked my brother if he wanted to go along with me just before evening. We usually walk up to the top of this hill where we can see down on these various springs that are along the side of this hill that rolls off a big oak flat. He said, "We're not going to the top of that hill. It's too much of a hike. We'll just walk diagonally along the side of that hill till we get to a rock pile. Then we'll just sit down and glass from there. Just check it out, see if there's any deer moving around, any coyotes, any bear, any deer, just what's happening out there." Didn't expect we'd see anything, so I left my deer rifle at home and I just carried along my little rimfire, my 17 HMR, which would kill a deer if I got within 50 yards of it. And I thought if we did see a deer, I could probably sneak up on him and get a closer shot. But I didn't expect to use it or take a shot. So we drove up to the place we usually park and started walking up diagonally along this hill. And we got up to a big flat rock like this one here. And we're sitting there glassing around. Glassing, looking north, looking south, each of us looking at our own little areas. It was pretty clear, we could see pretty far away. So we were glassing for, an hour, hour and a half, just as the sun started to peek down behind the mountain. But way before it got dark, we weren't going to be up there in the dark. So I'm just sitting there glassing, looking around. And then I hear this psst, psst. So I turn over and look at my brother. He'd brought his camera. He's glassing through his binoculars, and he was taking pictures of birds and rocks and coyotes and stuff. And he says, Hey, there's a buck over here. And I go, Where? He goes, right there, about 100 yards away across this hill, right by that rock. I can't see anything. All I can see are trees and granite rocks. So I slide over closer to him, and I start glassing the area with my binoculars. And he says, right there by that rock that looks like it's split. He's almost behind it. That lower gray area that looks like a rock, that's a buck. So I zoom my binoculars into that little spot. Sure enough, it was a buck. You could just see the main beam of his right antler, which was kind of brown compared to all the gray over there in that rock pile. But his body was exactly the same color as those granite rocks, and he just disappeared into those rocks. You had to really look for a buck in that rock pile, and you could see that one brown beam. And he was looking away from us. His head was behind the rock. So really the only shot I had was to put a bullet right behind his ear in his head, because any part of his body, that little 17 would have just blown up and not caused any damage at all. But it was more like 150, maybe 160 yards away, and I'm thinking, if I hit any kind of bone or anything, that little bullet's just going to disintegrate. It's not going to get any penetration whatsoever. If he was inside of 100, closer to 75 or 50, I would have taken that shot. If I could have got penetration of his skull, I could have killed that buck. But I didn't want to chance it. So I sat there waffling back and forth, going over this in my mind, and thinking what my odds were, what different scenarios I could, because you could tell right away by looking at this buck that he was big. I mean, his horns were big, round bases, palmated joints where the tines branch off. He was a big buck. He looked to be only a 3x3, but he was a much bigger buck than what you see in this picture. A big body, too. Well, I fiddled around there and decided I can't take this shot, but maybe I can get closer. But we've been whispering loud enough that I'm sure this buck knew we were there. You could just kind of tell by the way his ears were perking up and perking around. So I decided, well, you know what? I'm just going to try to sneak over there at him. And if I get close enough for a shot, well, I do. And if I don't get close enough, well, I should have brought a deer rifle. I know he would be in the meat locker by now. So as I start sneaking, I get maybe 50 yards away. My brother's continually watching him and snapping pictures at him through the camera. These pictures right here, as a matter of fact. And he says, "Hey, never mind. He's gone." I never even heard him move, because usually when a deer take off, you can hear them bounce. When they bounce like kangaroos as they leap. But I didn't hear anything, so I walked over there and looked all around and continued walking on around the hill, seeing if I could get if he was spooked or if he was just walking away from where we were at. Maybe I could get a shot at him. But no, he just disappeared. So when I got back over to where Clay was sitting and he was showing me what was on his camera, the buck had seen me moving, of course, and heard us talking, and before he took off, he turned around and looked back at us. And that was these pictures here. I never saw these pictures until I got back and looked at Clay's camera. But he knew exactly what he was doing. And I thought about going out and looking for him afterwards, but that's rough country and that's a tough climb. And this is a smart old boy. We probably weren't going to sneak up on him again. So I just pretty much stayed to the roads or where the four-wheeler could get me, and I found one that was not quite this good, but almost just as good. A good week, 10 days later, and I put him in the freezer instead. So this old boy is still up there on that mountain, and I sure would like to get these sheds and take a look at him. But I'm pretty sure this guy will be a humongous 3-point or a nice big 4-point next year.